It's time for John McMullen here on the Sports Bash, our 97.3 ESPN.com Eagles and NFL Insider. Of course, he was at the game last night for the Eagles. On the scoreboard, it said 19-10, but in reality, John, that was a 13-10 game that was way closer than it should have been.
Yeah, it was. The Raiders are a bad football team, and you kind of saw that. And I mentioned during the week just how bad their offensive system is and some of their route concepts. And I think you saw that all come to fruition. What we didn't expect is the Eagles' offense to be that bad. And it's a concern moving forward. There's no question about it. Nick Foles didn't play well. There's no getting around it. It was as bad as it seemed at first look. And the Eagles have a lot of work to do. But the good news is 13-2, they keep finding ways to win football games, and obviously the number one seed in the NFC.
You know, John, I was actually pleased that Peters at the press conference was dismissive of letting the backups get in playing time. He made the comment, what does the backup do, just hand the ball off? It seems like as a former quarterback, he understands that Foles needs reps, and he's not going to get better, and the offense isn't going to get better if Foles isn't out there working with these guys.
Yeah, I think the biggest issue, and even going back to the Giants game when he had 4 touchdowns and it looked a lot better aesthetically, there were a lot of plays where you saw him holding on to the football, double clutching, not sure of where to go with the football immediately. And that has to do with the fact he hasn't played a lot and he's not used to being out there. And I think you add the weather into the equation last night, very cold game, very windy, and the fact that Nick just wasn't sure of himself. And you had sort of a snowball effect, and the game turned out as bad as it did. The guy needs reps, and the people concerned about injuries, you can't legislate injuries in this league. And those who think, whatever name you want to throw out there, Colin Kaepernick, Robert Griffin, doesn't work that way in the NFL. You don't bring in a quarterback in week 17 and say, oh, maybe he can play for us.
John, speaking of the quarterback position, we saw Foles. I counted at least 4 throws that it looked like he was either too early or the receiver was too late in terms of where they were going with the ball. You saw the bad snaps by Kelsey. It just seems like we've seen 3 different versions of Foles now. We saw the one who basically did the job, got out of L.A. with the win. We saw the one who had the 4 touchdowns against the Giants. And then we saw the guy last night who looked like that he just doesn't have enough time with the offense. So which Nick Foles do you think it is? Is it the guy who can get out of town with a win, or is it the guy who looks like he's a little lost in the offense? Which Nick Foles are we going to see moving forward?
Well, I think you're going to see in between, really. You're not going to see what it was last night. You're not going to see 4 touchdowns like it was against the Giants. From the moment Carson Wentz went down, I've said it time and time again, the margin of error gets smaller, and we've seen that. And it's been small for 2 consecutive weeks against bad competition. It's going to continue to be small. It's a dogfight. That's the term Doug used after the Giants game. I asked him about it last night. That's what it's going to be every week. It's going to be scratch and claw from this point forward. Obviously, week 17 doesn't matter, so we're talking about the playoffs. The good news is everything's going to be at Lincoln Financial Field. If you get through the first game, the NFC Championship game is going to be here. So that's the positive. And the other aspect is there's something to the fact that this team figures out a way and closes games. It's difficult in the NFL. When they were down a field goal last night, and I heard the boos, I was kind of stunned because it never even entered my mind that the Eagles were not going to win that football game simply because the Raiders find ways to lose and the Eagles find ways to win. Ultimately, that's what happened.
John, switching over to the defense now, I mean, they seem to improve over the past couple of weeks. And I get they played the Rams, who are a high-scoring team, but they obviously took a misstep against the Giants last week, giving up nearly 30 points to them. What did you see from the defense last night that gave you more confidence moving forward? And I get they lost Jalen Mills for a bit. They lost Brandon Graham for a bit, but Chris Long stepped up. You know, in your mind, does this defense now give you more confidence rolling into next week? Obviously, I know it's a meaningless game, but they still need the reps. And do you think they have more confidence in themselves now if they get some rest and they get ready for their first playoff game?
Well, sure, it was good to stop sort of the negative direction for that unit. You know, it's interesting, and I said, you know, 1 week you're giving up 500-plus yards to Eli Manning, and the offense and special teams are bailing you out, and the next week you can't move the football at all, and the defense is bailing you out. So that's sort of what good teams do. If one unit is not on par, the other unit steps up, and that's what the Eagles defense did in the second half. I mean, turnover after turnover after turnover, and they're making plays. It's not like the Raiders were just putting the football on the ground. You see that Malcolm Jenkins forced fumble and fumble recovery. There's a guy just ripping the football out of the running back's hands. So they were creating opportunities, and that's a very positive sign because they had been heading in a negative direction. You take away Jalen Mills getting beat on the one sluggo route, and it's a great performance. Now, you also have to temper it a little bit with the fact that the Raiders are pretty bad, and their offense is very simplistic. And you know, you got to go back to 2001, guys. The Raiders, remember, kept winning the battle of field position because the Eagles' offense couldn't move it at all. They had the football 6 times, plus 40 on their own 40. And they're the first team since 2001 to not generate any points getting the football that much in that good of field position. And the last one was Minnesota against Baltimore, who was playing Spurgeon Wynn, their third-string quarterback, because of the injuries. Derek Carr makes $25 million. That team's a mess. So you have to put that into the equation as well.
I mean, you could put that into perspective as well, John. And you know, I know the Eagles pretty much beat them up last night, but there's still the concern of the big play. And as you mentioned, you actually just alluded to it, Jalen Mills got beat on the sluggo route by Amari Cooper. And then that's the second week in a row that he has, or even Ronald Darby got beat the previous week against the Giants. Are the big plays a concern now for this Eagles defense if they can't generate a pass rush? And as you mentioned, the Raiders are a mess right now. And that's now 2 weeks in a row where two bad teams have beaten them down the field with these big plays. Is that going to be a concern rolling into the playoffs? Because as we mentioned before, next week against the Cowboys is a meaningless game. But if they're playing a team like New Orleans, Carolina, or Atlanta with a really good offense, I mean, I would say those big plays have to be a concern, no?
Yeah, they do. I mean, it's on film now, so people realize the Eagles' corners are susceptible to double moves, and they're going to keep going to that well until the Eagles prove they can stop it. But you brought up a good point. One of the things people don't think about, and Jim Schwartz will always say, and it's true, the pass rush and coverage are in concert together. And the Eagles are of the belief that their pass rush is generally going to get home, and that doesn't necessarily mean a sack. But it does mean you're going to get the quarterback off the spot. You're going to force him to throw the football early. He's going to get it out of their hands. And that's where the corners say, we can jump this route because they're not going to be able to do the double move because the pass rush is going to get home. So it's not just the corners, but certainly they have to tighten that up. And you're right. I mean, once you get to the playoffs, it's going to be tough competition. The good news is, if you look at the landscape, and I don't think people have realized this enough, because you could see it, from the weather in that game last night, if you saw Saturday night's game, you saw how the Vikings win easily, but their offense was stymied in weather. Remember, everything goes through Philadelphia. New Orleans is a dome team. Minnesota is a dome team. The Rams play in Los Angeles. It's not going to be easy to play in Philadelphia.
Talking with John McMullen on 97.3 ESPN.com Eagles and NFL Insider. John Every Day is brought to you by Geno's, the winemaker's choice for 50 years. Visit Geno Pinto on the White Horse Pike in Hamilton, online at genopinto.com. Geno's, the winemaker's choice for 50 years. And John, you mentioned coming through Philadelphia. The Eagles are now 13-2 with Doug Peterson at home. They're out scoring opponents. I believe I saw that was 198 points at home. And we're mentioning a defense. To me, that's a major credit to the defense and Jim Schwartz, because you saw the adjustments they made last night. They were much better in the second half than the first half. You saw the fact that they're able to not just handle almost any team that they've gone against at home, but they've done it. Remember, last year it was the Steelers. It was the Falcons. This year you're seeing it with the Raiders and the Redskins and other teams. It seems like at home this defense just plays at another level.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's easier to play at home if you're a defense because of the noise, and generally the offense has to go with silent counts, and that makes them a tick slow. So it just makes things easier, and they have been lights out for pretty much defensively at home, and that's why sort of I don't understand some of the sky is falling talk this morning, because Nick obviously did not play well, and again, I'm not trying to sugarcoat that at all. He was terrible, but the reality is that this team is 13-2, and by the way, essentially has won 3 consecutive games with the backup quarterback that everybody thinks is terrible. So that's not bad. And to have the best record in the NFL, to have everything in Philadelphia where you have dominated opponents, yeah, you might not be the prohibitive favorite. If Carson Wentz is healthy, you're feeling really good that the Eagles are going to go to the Super Bowl, and it's probably not even going to be all that difficult, to the fact where it's going to be tougher. The margin of error grows smaller, as I said, but it's certainly not cause to say the season is over.
John, one more quick thing on the defense. Sidney Jones, they have to make a decision on him this week. Do you think it's going to be leaning towards he is going to be activated this week and they would cut somebody and possibly let him play and see what he has, or do you think it's more likely that they end up just shutting down Sidney Jones and just waiting until next year to really get their debut of him?
Yeah, I would imagine it leans more towards the latter, simply because with everybody healthy, Sidney's not going to play. He's not going to get on the field for Jalen Mills or Ronald Darby or Patrick Robinson, even Rasul Douglas. And if you think about his impact as far as special teams, it's not going to be the same as a Jalen Watkins type. He's very versatile and can play corner and safety. So I do not think they are going to activate him. That's not to say it's not a possibility. He is a talented kid. I just don't see where he fits in a role for the postseason. There's a possibility, because he's such a high-profile pick, that they just carry him on the roster, and he's not active on game day. So that part is certainly a possibility. But for people who think he might play, I just don't think that's going to happen, barring injury, of course.
John McMullen, you can follow him on Twitter at JFMcMullen, also covers the NFL nationally. John, so the Patriots did what I think most people assumed they would do, which is they're going to sign James Harrison, who was cut by the Steelers. So we could see James Harrison coming off the edge in the AFC Championship game and blowing up Ben Roethlisberger as hard as possible, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, it seems like that's the kind of stuff the Patriots always do. But, he's was the oldest defensive player in the NFL. Then he got cut. Then it was Terrence Newman. Now he's the oldest defensive player in the NFL again. So this is not James Harrison, who is Defensive Player of the Year. back in the day. And I think all the hand-wringing of sort of Steelers fans saying, oh, James Harrison is going to give the Patriots all their secrets, that stuff's overrated. The Patriots already know all the Steelers' secrets, and not because they're cheating, and vice versa, because they can watch the film. They know what the Steelers do. The Steelers know what the Patriots do. But from the Patriots' perspective, they don't have a lot of talent on the front seven. That's probably the weakness of their team. So to bring in a wily veteran, give it a shot, maybe they can get something out of him. But it's not certainly it's a bigger move because of the name. This is not a superstar going from Pittsburgh to New England.
No, but John, we did see, remember, it was Chris Long last year. They used him in certain spots, and he was very serviceable. He really did a good job. And obviously Harrison is not as young as Chris Long, but he is definitely a guy who stays in good shape. And I could see him, if he gets, let's say, I'm just going to throw out a number, 25, 30 snaps a game on third down situations, that's a much better improvement than you mentioned a Patriots pass rush that has basically been anemic half the season.
Well, yeah, I mean, and the thing is, but remember, Chris Long, and Chris, by the way, has played very well for the Eagles. Remember, he's there the entire year. He's practicing. He's part of the system. Here you have a guy coming in week 17, and you sort of roll the dice and say he's a veteran. He knows how to play. Maybe we can get him on the field for 15 to 20 snaps, and maybe he can do something. I compare it more to how Dwight Freeney has been used over past seasons when nobody signs him early and they need a pass rush and they go get him late. And every once in a while he makes a big play. I think that's what the Patriots are hoping for. But if the Patriots are going to beat you, it's going to be because of Tom Brady and Bill Belichick and everything they do. It's not going to be because of James Harris.
John, I brought this up on my show on Saturday. I wanted to get your opinion on it, and that is, everyone's talking about the potential coaching openings, and the one I'm not hearing enough about, I think there could be a potential for the Titans to have a coaching opening. This would be the second straight year this team could miss the playoffs when they were actually in a position to maybe make it. And that loss to the Rams yesterday, including, it's just another example of how the defense has really not played well. The offense is regressed compared to last year. Marcus Mariota is not getting better. He's gotten worse. I know part of it's the injury, but he just does not look comfortable in that offense. Could the Titans possibly, as a front office, look down and say, I'm not seeing progress. I'm seeing progress with Jared Goff. I'm seeing progress in other teams around the league with quarterbacks. We need to get a quarterback guy in here for Mariota.
Yeah, I mean, it's a possibility. I would argue the other end of the spectrum and the fact that they call it the exotic smash mouth around the Titans, the way they run their offense. I think Mike Mularkey has been helpful to Marcus Mariota because I think he was incredibly raw coming into this league, and it was always going to be difficult for him to get up to speed because of the offense he played in college. I think he's done a lot of good things. Everyone looks at Sean McVay. I'll just say this about young quarterbacks. If they do have some success, and this is, I would say, for the Houston Texans as well, because Bill O'Brien kind of showed what he can do with Deshaun Watson. I do not like changing offensive coordinators, position coaches, offensive head coaches, whatever it may be, with young quarterbacks who have had success. Goff is the exact opposite. Jeff Fisher was a disaster for him, so they rescued his career by bringing in Sean McVay. But if you look at what Bill O'Brien was able to do in the small sample size with Deshaun Watson, Mularkey, it's more of a gray area, so I get what you're saying, but I think he's done some good things to mask the deficiencies of Mariota. And I point towards Derek Carr. They changed their coordinators. Look at the disaster he is today versus Christmas Eve of last year when he got injured and he was an MVP candidate. And that's all because Bill Musgrave's contract ended. They didn't bring him back. They changed to Todd Downing, and it's a disaster. So I would be very, very wary of that.
He is John McMullen on 97.3 ESPN.com. Eagles, the NFL Insider. Follow him on Twitter at JF McMullen. And, of course, he is brought to you every day by Geno's, the winemaker choice 50 years. Visit Gino Pinto on the White Horse Pike in Hamilton, online at GinoPinto.com. John, appreciate the time as always. We'll catch up with you tomorrow.
Hey, thank you, guys.